Welcome to my first ever podcast, which is something I haven't imagined doing, but here I am, and it feels like the right thing to do. And I'm not quite sure how this is going to go, but I have notes. I did some research on podcasting and then nearly didn't do it because it was overwhelming. And I definitely don't have all the equipment that they suggest. I do have a little microphone that I'm using and my computer. And this is going to be a real learning curve, but I think it's a way to go. So let's see what happens. So I'm calling this podcast for the moment. It's got the working title, Make a Tea. And this comes from my extended voice notes that I send to friends. Some of them love them, and some of them probably curse. But I always say after this is like a podcast, make a tea, and so that's where that comes from. And for some friends who are very close, and this might be a bit of an overshare, I'll say have a wee and make a tea because it's going to be a long one. Yeah, so make a tea. If you haven't got one already, pause, go and get one. Or maybe you're running or walking or whatever you're doing, but have a tea after or a coffee or whatever your chosen beverage. So I have decided to do this because I find myself in an unusual situation, which is not unusual. And I've always been a little bit of a chatterbox. My early school reports say chatty, bright and happy and chatty. And so it's always been something that's been there from birth, it seems. And I do spend a lot of time by myself. And so when I'm with people, I tend to get carried away and like to talk, which is no bad thing. For a long time, I felt like that was a bad thing. It turns out it's quite good because we all have something to say. But sometimes I might go off on a tangent. So this is going to be quite an interesting exercise for me to try and keep within the bounds of a topic. And I've got many topics. And trying and make it brief as possible. Well, it's a podcast. It's going to be longer than you want, probably. And hopefully along the way, I'll have friends come and join me, but we'll see. So about 2 years ago, well, no, that's not right. Many years ago, I started feeling like I needed to do something different. And I was living in North Devon in England, and I'd been living there for a long time, and I loved it. It's a beautiful place, full of lovely, lovely nature, stunning nature actually, and beautiful friends, and a really, really lovely life. But something inside me was saying, this doesn't feel like home anymore. And I'd had that before when I lived in Kent, where I grew up. It doesn't feel like home anymore. I'm supposed to live somewhere else. And I've always felt that I'm supposed to live abroad somewhere, but not sure where. From a bigger picture point of view, I've always felt like I've been on the outside watching other people playing a game I wasn't allowed to play. It's like, let's call that game Monopoly, because it's very much like that life, especially in the Western world, where a game of Monopoly, have you bought your first property? Are you buying it with somebody? All these different milestones that society wants us to achieve, all these accolades that we're supposed to have. And that, for me, became a bit of a problem because I didn't seem to be able to achieve them. And when I started to try and achieve them, when I tried to do things to make other people proud, or I felt would make other people proud, or when I attempted to do things differently away from my intuition, I'd get ill, I'd get sick. And I was always quite sick as a child, had quite a few challenges with allergies and illnesses from quite a young age, and was very sensitive. And that sensitivity was seen as a negative thing. And I understand where that came from. For when you've got a child who's unwell and seems very sensitive, you want to make them better. And this is never, and it won't be ever, about apportioning blame, because it's not about that. There's understanding where you came from. There's understanding the stories behind how you felt and your journey. But it's not about apportioning blame. It's about understanding, finding the keys that made you think the way you thought if that way didn't suit you? I'm confusing myself already. So, what's this podcast going to be about? I'm just going to circle back a bit. It's going to be about all sorts of things, but mostly it's going to be about the journey of life and finding our way back to ourselves, the going back inwards. And this has been my journey over the last 12 years since I was sick in 2014. And 2 years after that illness, which I'll come back to on another podcast, got a lot to talk about. 2 years after that, I started the journey into yoga. And it was an inner calling out, an inner voice was saying, yoga, yoga, yoga. And I stepped into that for myself, never imagining for one moment that it would begin a massive change in my life and bring me into a career that I really hadn't thought about or planned. And yoga led on to trauma release work, which led on to more yoga training, breathwork training, all sorts of different practices that I've used on myself to awaken myself within, to come back to who I truly am. Because in earlier life, I went off on tangents that really weren't about me. They were about other people. They were about trying to please society. And I never really managed. And I got sick and I was running on empty. I burnt out. And it's this path that has taken me back. It's this path of learning, of coming back to myself through all the different practices. That is what has put me back on a new path, a path that's more mine, a path that's very much outside of that game of Monopoly that I felt like I was not allowed to play, or looking into from the outside and feeling a sense of lack and a sense of failure. But now, these many years down the line, after doing all these different practices and meeting myself in a different way, I'm really glad that I'm not playing that game. And it's perfectly fine if you are, but it didn't suit me, it doesn't suit me. And now I'm playing a different game, or maybe not playing a game at all. I'm living my life by my own rules, because games have rules. And those rules tend to be a little bit difficult for me. I've never been kind of naughty. I'm not someone who likes to break laws deliberately, but I always found certain rules, adhering to certain behaviors, made me a little bit frustrated, like they do a lot of people. And this is not about breaking rules. This is just about finding the rules, or finding the game, finding the way that suits me better. And it's certainly outside of the typical game that we're encouraged to play, particularly in the Western world. But where do I find myself now? We'll go back to different parts in later episodes. But right now, I find myself in a little bit of an unusual and scary place. Because in December 2024, I put all my worldly possessions into a storage unit. I gave up the house I was renting, and I began a journey of living a bit differently. I had, for the first year, for 2025, I had what I'm going to call my adult gap year. After many years of working in the field of yoga and trauma release and building a career using all these practices, I love what I did, but I found that I wasn't personally happy. I wasn't listening to what I wanted, what I needed. Because inside, there was that voice saying, this doesn't feel like home anymore. So what did I need to do? I needed to step outside of the game. I needed to step outside of what I'd been doing for a while. And because I was living to work, because I love what I did. And I'm so lucky that I love what I did and what I do. But I needed to take a break to find out what I wanted, to find out where I want to be, and to find out where I want to live. And on that note, I still haven't found there yet, but I know that I will. And it's the journey on the way that's the thing that we have to focus on, because it's the journey getting from A to B that's life. And sometimes we're looking for the perfect thing. We want the perfect thing. And we fight so hard to get there that we don't enjoy the journey on the way. And that is called presence. It's called being. And I have to be honest with you, I've had to work very, very hard in the last few weeks, the last couple of months, to remain present, to practice what I preach. Because after a year of traveling, finding myself for the summer of last year back in the UK, back in the town where I had been living for a month in June, which was beautiful, and then living with my parents most unexpectedly for the summer, which was for all of us a surprise, a gift and a challenge in equal measures for all of us. And then things started changing because I started finding opportunities to take me to different places because I knew that I would begin to have to start earning money again, working again after a time of time off. And I needed that time off to reset myself, to explore, to do some traveling that I hadn't done. And then I started to trust that the right things would come my way, allow them to come my way. And I had been doing this on the way, but this was a real episode of trust because I really didn't know what was going to happen. And then I found myself all of a sudden, with 3 days' notice, moving to work or teach yoga at a desert camp in Morocco, about an hour from Marrakesh. I did 2 months there, teaching daily yoga for people who were there really for camel rides and quad biking. And it was a magical experience. And I'll go back to that in another episode because it was magical in so many different ways and challenging too. Then, after coming back from my dad's 80th birthday to the UK, which is a momentous and fantastic occasion, thank you, Dad, and I found myself looking for the next adventure. And I landed a job working in Sri Lanka, teaching yoga at a wellness retreat, which was on paper something that I really, really wanted. But the reality was not quite the same as I imagined. And the reality never is the same as we imagine, especially when we'd never done something like that before. Now, I knew that it wasn't going to be super comfortable for me because I wasn't there as a guest, but I had a good room and the place was very beautiful in a very, very stunning, wild part in southern Sri Lanka. But while I was there teaching again, coming back to the tools that I love sharing, yoga, breath work, pranayama, meditation, various other things, coming back teaching those to people who were there and received these as part of a structured program or retreat program, giving myself again and absolutely loving that aspect. But I then had some personal issues. I had a food reaction, which is something that I suffer from with allergies and intolerances. I had a reaction to something that I ate. And then we had the conflict in the Middle East beginning, and that began a cycle of challenge for everybody because people couldn't travel out to Sri Lanka anymore. And the people who I was working for, the businesses were suffering because there were not enough guests. And the energy changed to one of happiness, of one of ease, to one of fear and reactivity, because people were reacting naturally to the global situation and its imprint on life around us. And then within a couple of days, my life changed because I was given 2 days' notice to ending my job very suddenly, along with many others whose personal circumstances would be affected much greater than mine, in that they didn't have a choice and the jobs that they had were important to them, of course, because there isn't so much choice out there in work. And it's a much more hand-to-mouth developing society. I, however, was finding myself in a bit of a challenge because I didn't want to stay in Sri Lanka any longer, mostly because it was being affected by the increasing lack of fuel and lack of people coming in, and I knew that that would imprint me in the long term. So I decided to reach out to some friends, and very luckily, a friend who has a villa in Bali offered me a place to stay. And this is where synchronicities come in. Andrew, who's a friend, I met in Bali approximately a year ago for about 8 minutes on a boat. We swapped numbers and got in touch over time. And after I'd been to Australia and then gone back to Bali, we then met up. It's a platonic relationship that he's a very lovely man who happened to have a villa in Bali. So I reached out to him in my crisis in Sri Lanka, and now this is where I find myself. I find myself in a very beautiful villa in Sanur in Bali. Wonderful and beautiful. And I have a huge amount of gratitude for my current situation. Bali, I hear you say, it must be amazing. Aren't you lucky? But there is something going on here with me that makes it not as fun. And this is where I have to be 100% honest. Because my nervous system has been massively triggered by the situation in Sri Lanka, the situation that affected me in Sri Lanka, and suddenly finding myself here in Bali, which is an immense gift. But it's thrown my nervous system into a reactive state. And the first 2.5 weeks of being here, and I've been here about just under 2.5 weeks, have been a big struggle. So this is one of the reasons why I wanted to make this podcast, in that the tools that I have learned, the things that I've practiced, I'm using on a continual journey, because we do the healing. And my job has become about helping people to heal, giving them the tools to help themselves to heal. And I love what I do, but I'm only human. And in this world at the moment where there's a huge amount going on and global energy is very challenging, it's very easy to become very scared and very fearful and move away from who we are. And I know this. And it triggered me to moving away from who I am into a place of fear and lack. Because the reality is, of suddenly in Bali, I have not earned the money that I intended to earn, and suddenly finding myself in a situation where visas in the countries around me make it quite difficult for me to work. So that's why one of the reasons why I'm doing this podcast. I have some time. I can work, I can do online sessions, and I am doing them. But that's what this is about. This is about being honest with ourselves about where we are. And this is about me using the practices that I've learned. And that's what I've been doing for the last couple of weeks. And it's been really, really, really difficult. I have been practicing yoga every day, using a healing kriya to use the energy of Svadhisthana chakra, which is our lower energy chakra, deep within the pelvic space in the sacral area. This is the energy of creation, desire. It's a very, very powerful healing energy, and I know this. So I learned on the teachings that I've learned through my trainings, and every day, even if I haven't felt like it, I've been doing my practice, my meditation, and my healing kriya to help move that energy up, to help me. I have been lying on my bed, leaning into where I can feel contraction in my body and consciously breathing into it in circular, rhythmic, conscious, connected circular breathing. And there's been some significant outflowings of grief and sobbing, ugly crying. It's been, to be fair, I've been a mess. It's been, not pretty, but those tears are precious. They release cortisol from our body. They release the contraction, the fear, the lack. And every time I've done it, I felt better after. Whew, yes. And I just did some today, because even though it's 2.5 weeks later, there was still something else within me holding on. There was something within that wanted to be seen. So there's a feeling inside that was uncomfortable. So I lay down, I lay on my bed, put a cushion under my knees and started breathing into the place that was feeling the discomfort. And within maybe a couple of minutes, 5 minutes, 10 minutes, it varies every time, emotions started to rise up. And this time I knew exactly what it was. It was for grief, for someone who I lost a couple of years ago. Most unexpectedly, this grief rose up, and I let myself feel it and see it and know it. And I had a little chat with that person who had passed, and everything began to feel easier again. So the last few weeks have been really difficult, and I recognise that I have been back in that cycle of fear and lack, especially around money and what's next. But today, a new moon, I'm coming back to myself. I've remembered who I am. I remembered what got me here in the first place, that trust that miracles happen, that I have space to allow the synchronicities. The synchronicity of meeting Andrew and suddenly finding myself a year later in his villa. The kindness of another human offering me a place to stay. The friends who've reached out to me. The time I have to spend by myself to allow this healing. To be in this place right now, this beautiful place, coming back to myself and giving myself this time. The energy within me, moving, flowing, all the tools I've learned. And as I move through these podcasts, we'll lean into various different tools. We'll lean into the yoga, we'll lean into the pranayama. Pranayama means energy expansion, using breathing. Breathing is the action of bringing energy in and out of our body. Pranayama, energy expansion. Modern times we call that breath work, but I use it in different ways. And I do not want to underestimate the power of the pranayamas and the historical learnings and teachings of yoga, which is where I've learned mostly mine from. Mostly all of it stems back, and that's terrible English, by the way. It stems back to historical teachings that come back from the ancients, from the dawning of the millennia, passed through over years and times. And it's these learnings have come through these ages that I'm leaning onto today and leaning into every day. Sometimes when it's hard and sometimes it's easy. But yoga, meditation, pranayama, breath work, yin yoga, energy work, which has been something that has been opened in me in the last few years as my journey in spirituality has become less physical and more subtle. And then leaning into my spirit guides. And spirit guides is something a few years ago I was very skeptical about. And I can't believe that I'm actually talking about spirit guides now as something that I lean into every day, because spirit guides a few years ago were something that I really felt very distant from and had a lot of skepticism around. But the journey that I've been on, and I like the word journey is very cheesy, but it is true. The journey from the physical to the subtle has taken me in all different directions and opened me up to so many different things. And I will lean into different versions of these in different podcasts. So please let me know in the notes what you'd like to hear about, and I shall guide different podcasts to different themes around the different practices that I use and the experiences that I've had. So that's me right now. Leaning into practices, leaning into the fear, moving past the fear that's resided within me in the last few weeks, that has been awakened by my nervous system response to my situation. When our nervous system responds, it's to help us survive. It's like we're a ship and new sailors have jumped on board to help us go in the right direction. But we don't let them go once we're safe, and they hijack, they become hijackers. They don't want to leave. They stay on board, and then more come on board, and then suddenly it's full. And suddenly it's not your place anymore. It's not your ship anymore. It's been taken over. So when we learn to regulate our nervous system, we recognize that the past responses were there to help us, but the thing that put us there is not happening anymore. So it's okay. We can jettison those sailors, as it were, so they're not hijacking us anymore. We can come back to ourselves. We can take over our vehicle using the terminology of the body being a ship here. But our vessel, our body, is ours. And our nervous system is there to help us. But that survival mechanism can get overwhelmed. And if we don't learn the tools to bring us back to ourselves, to regulate our nervous system, we find ourselves living in a continual state of hijack. And that's what happened to me in the last few weeks. That's where I've been, completely hijacked and propelled back into old ideas of fear, old cycles. And I'm coming back to myself now because I'm using those tools. So remembering that healing is a continual journey. We never fully healed. And I'm sorry if you think you're going to be, but the reality is we get to a point where we think we're doing so well, and then something else will happen and it will send us back to a place we thought we'd never be again. But then when you've learned the tools, you know, hold on a minute. I don't need to do the things that I used to do, the old habits that didn't really support me. I can do something that is going to support me, that's going to bring me back to myself. So I'm sitting here today in my room at my friend's villa in Bali, where I've really struggled over the last couple of weeks. And that sounds crazy, doesn't it? I'm looking out my windows to a beautiful swimming pool and stunning tropical plants in a really wonderful place. But it's been really hard. And it's really important to be honest. And I'm being really honest with you here and honest with myself here and saying that despite being in a beautiful place physically, this stunning island, this beautiful villa, I've really been struggling. But my tools have brought me back, and I'm really grateful for everything I've learned and for recognizing that it's okay. It's okay in the midst of some of the amazing times that I've had in the last 12, 13, 15, 16 months since setting myself free. The nervous system has been active. It's been working for me. And I have those tools now to remember who I am. And in remembering who I am, I know that the fear and lack that rose up in that situation when my body had been hijacked, that's beginning to diminish. It's beginning to disappear. I'm beginning to remember that I know that miracles happen. The answers will come. The situation will resolve itself. I will find my way. And I say I will find my way with no fear, in a sense of absolute trust, in a place of allowing those opportunities, those people, that abundance, that love to come my way. Because I know that it can and I know that it will. Because I know that the frequency of the energy I'm now going to put out is going to attract that to me. And falling back into fear and lack just takes it back to a place in the past where it couldn't come to me. Because we get what we put out. And if you put out a sensation, an energy of fear and lack, you're going to get that back. So now I'm beginning. Now I've jettisoned my hijackers and I'm beginning to come back to the person that I'd become before the last 6-7 weeks. I'm remembering the energy that I have, the energy I hold within, the brilliance, the unique beautiful soul that I hold within me. And that is the answer. We are all beautiful souls. We're a soul having a human experience. And my human body reacted to the situation around me, protecting my physical body. And it spun me out for a while. But as I've gone back in using the yoga, using the breath, using the meditation, using all my tools and trusting my guides, I come back to myself. I come back to the soul that I am within, the soul that knows the answers, the soul that can emit a light of pure love, of pure vibrancy, of pure attraction. So that's what I'm doing now. I'm leaning into that light. Whew. So that's me for today. Leaning into my light, remembering who I am after a couple of really, really difficult weeks. So please feel free to comment. Let me know how you're feeling, because the world is a challenging place at the moment. And I felt that challenge, and I know you are. But when we remember who we are, when we slow down, when we go within, when we replace habits that don't support us, and some of those habits are things that we all do. Some of them are things like drinking, eating sugar, eating food, comfort eating, scrolling, doom scrolling. There's so many different things that we lean into out of habit when we feel uncomfortable with ourselves. And we all do them, and I do them. I procrastinate. Instead of doing the breathing, instead of doing the yoga, I will procrastinate until I actually do it. And the more that I lean into these tools, the more I go straight to them, and they become a tool. And I know that instead of procrastinating, instead of making another tea, I know, take a sigh, lie down and breathe, move my body. Something I find really good is putting on some music and dancing. And once I finish doing this podcast, that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to put on a song and I'm going to dance around the room to lift the joy within me. We have many, many tools that we can lean into to make us feel joy again when we've been activated. And when we learn the list, or we cultivate and grow that list of tools that are new habits to lean into, then we begin to grow and we begin to remember who we are. And that's the retreat within. So thank you for listening. And lean into new things. Take a sigh. Take another one. Release and relax by the breath, and do something different today to remember who you are within. Thank you for listening. Lots of love. Bye.